Now can you hear me? Okay, that's better. All right. So now that I've got this mic figured out, just a quick update. We had a delay in our lunch, so we're going to start our little discussion here just after noon. So if you can hang out and stick around, we'll start that. And in probably 20-25 minutes, hopefully we get our lunches here quick, and our guests can get some food before we start pestering them with questions. So again, thanks for your patience. We'll get rolling here in just a little bit on the teams, and then for those of you that are interested, we will record this and try to get this published on our ASSP website, so that any of this discussion we can see later. So go. I'm not sure who is. So just for those of you who are concerned about your hair, Josh, you're not on camera. It's only the 3 chairs up here that is actually on camera. So when the chairs start narrating themselves, no, just kidding. All right. So again, thanks for being here. Just checking in for those that are online. We just got our lunches here, so we're going to go ahead and start the interview process, little presentation in about 10-15 minutes. So sit tight. We appreciate you being online and participating with us, and we'll be back in just a few. Thanks. So just a quick note, I have a microphone, not so much so that you can hear me, though you probably can. Thank you all for being here. We're going to do some housekeeping items. Just a quick note on, just a reminder actually, that today was the Great Shakeout. A lot of people participated in that. I got my notification from Mountain Land Applied Technology, so I know they're participating. So many of you know what that is, but that's the shakeout is the practice run, the drill for earthquakes. So I prepped my 7-year-old yesterday. He's like, "What's the Great Shakeout?" And I'm like, "Well, it's where you practice keeping safe during an earthquake." And so, anyways, we had a grand old time teaching him. He went to school prepared. He was ready to go. All right. So speaking of emergency preparedness, exits from this area, those that are in this room, our nearest exit is right through this doorway, through the front, and then we meet in the field to the south of us to regroup, make sure we got everybody. If there's an earthquake, fire, any sort of natural disaster, that's our nearest exit. The restrooms are out in the hall, just across this hall from us here and to the north, and exits to the parking lots back down to the west, where you came in. So thank you again for being here. We do have first aid kit and AED across the hallway as well, if that's needed. Hopefully we don't need that. Shouldn't have that much excitement today. John's like, no, definitely not. We don't want that kind of excitement here. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and introduce our guests today, and again, thank them for being here and invite them up to do just kind of an informal panel. We're hoping that you're preparing, and actually, is there any way I can have you, Roberto, monitor the chat so that people online can feed us questions? If you have any online, those that are online, if you have any questions you'd like to have answered, please feel free to jump those into the chat, and Roberto will feed those to us so we get real-time contact or within a few minutes. So, okay. So right up front, well, we've got. Please welcome. All right. Please welcome Ted Black, the state fire marshal, currently the state fire marshal. Just a quick info about him. He's got about 40 years of experience in fire and fire safety prevention, both industry, working with what doesn't, well, agencies that don't, that aren't even incorporated anymore, but the Salt Lake County Fire, Weber County for about, or Weber
Fire District.
Weber Fire District for 12 years, and another, he's been in the fire marshal's office for 10 years. He's a Utah native, has 7 wonderful children, and more grandchildren, right?
6, just 6 grandchildren.
6 grandchildren. Awesome. So so he's volunteered to be here to support us, talking about fire safety, and we're going to focus most of this conversation on what you can do in the corporate world and business, industry, manufacturing, and we do have a representative from the oil and gas industry as well, so we can focus that way as well. Next, we have our Chief Deputy Fire Marshal for the state of Utah, John Ritchie, here. He's been, how long have you been with the Fire Marshal's office?
Remember the emphasis on half?
Exactly 5.5 years. Okay. 5.5 years. When you're 5, a half year matters. So he wanted to point that out. But he's not wet behind the ears. He's got 28 years of experience officially on the Roy Fire, with the Roy Fire, and a few part-time years on top of that. So he has 4 wonderful daughters and 13 grandchildren. So he's a happy man. And he said he wanted me to impress that that's really the most important thing in life. When we're here at work, we're doing it for our families, and that's why I'm a safety representative. That's why I work with the ASSP. That's why I do what I do. So I'm glad that we're here in this together. So just a little bit about them. I'm going to actually let them introduce themselves, any other details that they want to add, and just jump right into Ted. Any other things?
No, that's
all.
pretty much sums it up. Thanks for inviting us. It's our whole goal is to get ahead of problems. So when somebody invites us and wants to know more, that's meaningful to us. We appreciate it.
Awesome. I want to give a shout out to Andrew at the, what's his last name?
McCormick.
Andrew McCormick. He's the education director at the state fire marshal's office as well. And he gave me some wonderful information, but he's doing some training. So again, getting ahead of that. He's not able to be here today. So John, anything else you want to add?
No, we need to blame Andrew for this.
I love it.
Because Joseph had called him, he was kind of at desperate time. I got a phone call and an invite to this a day ago. And so I sensed that Joseph had called me that in his dialogue with Andrew was, I need some help because I'm not getting it from the local guys. I've made phone calls. They're busy, understandably so. Can we help? And we obviously want to help anywhere we can, but not understanding where the scope was, because normally part of our plans review and what we do are state buildings, schools and universities and colleges and schools, but we help everywhere, across the whole state. And as Joseph started explaining to me what was happening with this little group being hosted by Oakland, which we thank you for lunch, that's delicious. We started doing some brainstorming ideas on what you guys were looking for. And with the short notice, we kind of came up with the idea of, hey, let's just do some Q&A on what you guys need so we understand what your scope is, see if we can help you from our end. Again, mine is structural firefighting. I was with Roy City for 34 years, but I only was full-time in the system, and I retired in 2012 as the chief, of which I served in 12 years. So I've seen that side. Ted, on the other hand, has a wealth of knowledge, being a fire marshal. I'm in my new position just 2 months. Ted's the state fire marshal, been a little more than 3 months, but he was the chief deputy for 10 years in my position, but a wealth of information on industry. He knows a lot about codes and what you guys deal with all the time. And so I appreciate Ted coming with me. He offered at the last minute to say, hey, I'll go with you. And this is where, like Ted mentioned, this is where we want to help you guys. We believe we're part of that resource that's out there. And we want to be on top of it in front, not behind when there's an issue. It's a lot easier to take care of those problems up front, or try to mitigate anything we can, where everybody in your industry, based off my experience, starts at the end. When can we get it done? And then whatever happens in between here. So
again, thank you for being here. I'm going to actually just branch off your history and let's start out with something a little bit light and go with a question here to prompt some stories. And that is, as a firefighter, because you served as a firefighter for a while, so from that perspective as a first responder, can you share one or two stories, maybe your funniest runs you've ever been on?
Yeah,
I know this one's just for Carlin. She loves to laugh. So
does she? That's you. Okay. Do we have BYU in here too? I just thought I'd ask. Thank you. We thank all of you. And I think this is a welcoming group. So when you want to know about funny stuff, yeah, there's all kinds of funny stuff and stuff I probably shouldn't tell you, so I won't. But there was this one call I got on.
Just filter out the names and.
This one call I went on, and we'll call him Joe, because it was a her. We get a phone call. I'm on the engine at the time, and so I think I'm a captain on an engine. We get called to this house. It says there's a lady who's got a problem we need to go fix. And in the fire service, we're jack of all, master of none. And part of my customer service as the fire chief, which is coming to this position, is go and show up and see what we can do. We can make phone calls, get dispatch. I don't know. We pull into this one, and they took us into the bathroom, and this nice lady in red had her hand stuck down the toilet, and it was backwards. So you know where the nose goes, not where the neck goes down into the toilet. Her hand's backwards in that, and she can't get it out. What would you think you would do with that? More than once, but it didn't work. Got her carpet wet, got our shoes wet, so busted the toilet. That was the next option. We took it off, and we took it out in the front yard. We thought if we have to, because what's her hand do? Oh heavens, yes. We got some big boys. We just put us on all ends, and we carried this toilet up. We took the tank off, kept the bottom commode there, walked out on the front lawn. Well, what's her hand doing in the meantime? Because first it's backwards and it's wrong. What's it doing? It's swelling because of the softwood tissue trauma. So we're soaking this thing up with some dish soap. You know what I mean? Dawn or something. It wasn't working. We get around the front lawn, and just before I say, are we going to use a sledgehammer on this? Because we're really wasting a lot of time. We've been 20 minutes on this. We just get ready to go hit that thing, get one of the guys get off the engine. I squirt one more thing of Dawn in there, and her hand pops out. Oh, I got a kiss. It was great. Didn't want to know, ma'am. I have kids too, and they've got things that got flushed down there, but I don't know what she was doing.
That's awesome, John. Or Ted, sorry.
Mine aren't as funny as John's. I've spent my whole career in prevention. I determined early that's what I wanted to do. I was offered a position in the field that I turned down, but I was so excited when I went to work for Salt Lake County Fire many years ago that I was going to do the best job possible. And as a young man, I put heart and soul into that position. And my boss, the deputy fire marshal for Salt Lake County at the time, was a very funny man. And he pulls me aside one day and he says, Black, I need you to back off a little bit. He says, there's 400 guys on this department that count on a fire every once in a while. I didn't even know how to respond to him. I think I just turned and walked away because I honestly didn't even know what to say to him. He's a great guy. But
You know that the fire service uses acronyms, right?
Right.
BRTs, big red trucks. You know what I mean? Put the wet stuff on the red stuff. That's put the fire out. And Q&A. So let's get let's make sure the BRT's not in the parking lot. Let's get on with this QRA. We'll be good to go.
so if I may, if you're familiar where the Health Rider building was on the east side, about 66 South, something like that. I'm sure it's something else now. This was a long time ago. I was doing the final inspection on that building, and we took it off test, and something malfunctioned, and I rolled a full complement on a fire response to that. I still remember running out beside the building doing this as a battalion chief, 2 engines, a ladder truck, a paramedic, and an ambulance came rolling into that building that I was doing the inspection on. So yeah, that's bad. You look really bad and you get pointed at and laughed at anyway.
Interesting. My next question was most outrageous inspection, because now in your capacity you do a lot of inspections and plan reviews and that kind of thing. So most outrageous inspection that you've been on?
I did one that had somewhere in the neighborhood of 200 violations on one floor of a building. All fire sprinklers. It was a new tenant finish. The company didn't know what they were doing or didn't care, and literally did everything wrong. I've never seen anything like it before. Since there was actually 2 floors involved, I only inspected the one floor, and then I told them this needs to be repaired, and I left. And their attorney called me that night. I did tell him they got to fix it. Not much I can do to help you. And anyway.
Total recall. Total.
Yeah,
recall.
it was. I've never seen that. How could you be in the business and do it that poorly? It still baffles me that could happen. Anyway.
Oh, it happened just a couple of years ago. And I was on the inspection side. I was in a different position. And the fire marshal, the chief deputy at the time, assisted me when we went through a school that they wanted to try to, it was a school in our district that was being built by a contractor. And we had deadlines. And he says, we're going to meet those deadlines. And we went there knowing it wasn't going to be done. There's no stinking way. And I had to bring the chief deputy with me to make sure that they knew that. And the guy still said, you're going to get in this school. It was 12 months later we got in that school. So how could we do it when he told us 30 days. You can have a TO in 30 days. There ain't no stinking way. Ted's not going to let it happen in the first place. And we're not going to let it happen. It's ridiculous. So it's still happening. Even today, I still see this.
They're still screwing up the
Kind of.
installation of fire sprinklers.
This is just
Basically,
everything.
This was
the whole school.
So you can look at a building and you know how long roughly you've got left on the building. You've been in the business long enough. And so I told him if I'd walked in on this building today and you hadn't told me anything, I'd say you've got 3 months to finish it. They were having other problems, and they could have finished it in 3 months but they had other problems. But they were supposed to turn it to the school in a month, and they were supposed to have kids in it in a month and a half. And it was, unfortunately, it was a contractor that probably never should have taken the job. And so it ended up a mess for the school district. And anyway,
that's
challenging.
So now to the heart of our discussion here, from your perspective, two things. First, what are some things that you've seen that business owners have neglected that because of a fire, they're no longer in business? They weren't able to rebound or start back up again. And conversely, on the flip side, so we've got our poor performers and our rock stars. What are you seeing that rock star companies are doing? Say they have a fire and they're back up and running really quickly. So what are those key elements that you, from your perspective, make or break a business when it comes to fire?
So fire happens in the same way, same pattern. I've told groups I've talked to before, private citizens, that clean homes don't burn. That always causes a squirm or two in the audience. Clean, well kept, non-cluttered homes don't burn. Businesses are the same way. Clean, well-ordered businesses don't burn. And what you see as the big mistakes is we become complacent about safety, and you all see this in what you do. So the exit door that isn't used regularly becomes a storage area. The electrical problem that needs to be fixed, I'll get to someday. The exit sign that is out. We're interesting as human beings. When we see something wrong, we generally know it's wrong the first time. But after that, that's the way it's always been, or that's the way we've always done it. So there are some things that cause fires on construction sites. What we see is issues with hot works permits is fairly common. And the challenge is, do you really want to pay one person or two people just to stand there and watch while somebody welds? And do you want to have somebody there for 30 to 60 minutes after the hot work is complete to, there's no productive time there. And yet you lose one building to a fire, especially if it's a stick frame building. Don Chase was the chief of Sandy City when the hotel burned in Sandy that was framed. Some of you will remember that. Don said that's the biggest fire Sandy City ever had. It's like, so a stick frame building is just the same principle as building a campfire. You create an environment where there's fuel with oxygen and it becomes very burnable. I remember that fire specifically. I was on 53rd South, headed south. I could see that fire in Sandy from where I was. And I still remember they called for a ladder truck. The ladder truck said they were in the river bottoms. It was coming from South Jordan. And I was with Dave Lindbergh, who was the fire marshal of Salt Lake County at the time. I said, they've lost that building. They said, yeah, they have. When you get something like that burning, you're not going to stop it. Don said that was the biggest fire, and he was afraid the Hampton Inn next door was going to be the second biggest fire because the green grass was burning. That fire was so hot between the two buildings. And so hot works are a significant issue, and they require constant enforcement because nobody wants unproductive time. And so they finish, and when you finish at 3:30 and you're off at 3:30, you want to go home. You don't want to stand there for an hour until you can touch what you were welding. But if you do that, and if you follow the proper safety measures, if you have lookouts, if you write and develop a proper hot works program and follow that program and follow it even when it might not be required, like on a remodel where the building permit could take the place of a hot works permit, a smart company instigates a hot work permit anyway. And you regulate that within your own company. You develop the policy. There's code and would be happy to help you do that if you need that. But hot works is the key issue that I've seen in the last few years on large commercial buildings that burn during construction.
We have a saying in the fire service, predictable is preventable. And having this saying to the choir about what Fire Marshal was talking about, we've experienced those major fires just as recently as 12 months ago in this valley. So you have to weigh that based off of what Ted just mentioned. You know what I mean? And it's invaluable, I would think, to put somebody on that, to watch that. I've seen it. We burnt residential homes down. You guys have seen the plumber come in. Better be careful on the name. The soft water company come in and put on the cylinder, soldered in because it's not PEX, and 4 hours later we're there with a rip and fire. I've had 2 of those in our city. You know what I mean? And it's the exact same thing. An ounce of prevention. You know what I mean? Just put those people in that hot works. And there's so much remodeling going on just in this valley alone that you guys are involved with. Codes are not built because we think something's going to happen, right? Codes are built because of experiences that happened that created that code to be made. And hot works have been targeted fairly big that the fire marshal's pushing because of issues that we've had on fires. So that would be one. You know what I mean? The thing I see in the fire service when I was at Roy is it's predictable, it's preventable, but lack of being willing to expend money. So in Chinese restaurants, you have a hood. You guys know what the Type 1 hoods are with the suppression system. There's a manual pull and a link. If you was to go into Crown Burgers and watch them flip those hamburgers and the flames this high, okay, well, that's under a hood that's protected. Well, if those flames melt that fusible link and the system goes off, it's a what? It's a prevention. Put that fire out. I burnt the same Chinese restaurant down twice. Why? Because they didn't want their hood cleaned. It looked nice on the outside here, but between here and the fan on the roof, it was dirty. These guys clean in the middle of the night. Nobody's watching them. So prevention again, you know what I mean? Get out there, take care of that. You can stop. I went to the Chinese guy, said, "Hey, Young, we could have helped you with this." He said, "Oh no, we have big party when this rebuilt. We have big party. We could have stopped that big party." You know what I mean? By doing what you could have just gone a little extra. So again, predictable is preventable.
That's a really good point. I've been working on a policy within Oakland to shore up our demolition process. And I was talking to a demolition man, and he said, "You know what's crazy? When the dust or the chemicals inside the ductwork, starts on fire." It's like we were tearing out this ductwork and we were just having a grand old time. And then this fireball just rips through the entire building, up through the roof and everything because of the dust that was inside the dirty duct. So, I mean, it's not just in the, cooking industry, but any type of chemical or dust can become flammable and then become, well, you have, like you said, oxygen and the fuel. And then anyway, so interesting that you would bring that up. I had 2 different paradigms that I wanted to look at. And one was from a firefighter standpoint, and then so boots on the ground. And then the other was from a fire marshal standpoint, to expand on the same question. What are some of the things that as a firefighter, they are going to want to see when they roll up to a business that's on fire? So it's industry, it's not a home. What are they going to want to see?
Where's the closest hydrant, and is it working?
hydrants that aren't
Hydrants are
blocked.
unobstructed, unblocked, and open. There's so many times I pulled up on a house fire. It was 2 a.m. My ladder's in front of it. They should have been putting wet stuff on the red stuff. Remember that acronym? That means put the fire out. It's roaring. And I got the hydrant hooked. Well, you got to check your gauges. You got to make sure you're proficient because you're hooked to a 2-inch line. We need hooked to the 6-inch line on the west end and one on the east end and get plenty of water. Water is valuable. So make sure your PIOs are open. Make sure your hydrants are flowing. Make sure in the construction site that, and Ted will probably touch on this, when your inspection's going, that there's water in those. You don't have some closed valves because water's our biggest thing. And then, of course, obstructions. You know what I mean? We don't have fires in clean restaurants. But every back door's blocked. Every back door's got a barricade on it. The oil's left on. You can't get in the extension cords. It's all about prevention. You know what I mean? And 90% of these fires, there's nobody in them. They're unoccupied. You know what I mean? When you're in there. But when they're in there and they're occupied, you want excess lights lit. I mean, you look at the Home Depot, that 98,000 square foot Home Depot that just burnt. Did you see that? Are you saying how come it burnt to the ground? It was what? It had sprinklers. But what did it have that had more volume than the sprinkler could hold in check? Sprinklers are designed to hold till we can get there and put it out, right? It's past the overhead. It was storage, in rack, you name it. And they lost it. Amazon Prime, same thing here, $210,000 square foot. It's the exact same thing. The reason we go in and do company inspections is to make sure life safety is covered first. They can get out. Are your exits blocked? Are your lights lit? Do you have working alarms? And this same thing can go to your home resident. Do we have extension cords? Do we have working smoke alarms? And if it's a battery operated one, it quit chirping when I took the battery out and put it on the counter. You don't know how many structure fires I went on that has a battery sitting on the counter, non-working. There's a reason for that. Do you have an escape plan? Do you have a meeting place? You went through that with us.
Just a quick echo on that one. I was woken up in the middle of the night and a chirping fire alarm.
Always is.
And I changed as many batteries as I could think of, and it was still chirping. And I thought, you know what, this is a time when we get out. So I took my whole family and we went out into the camper, and the kids were sleeping, and I waited for the fire department because I wanted to make sure that we didn't have something like carbon monoxide, which I couldn't smell. And so they went through and actually cleaned my fire alarms because the dust that had accumulated over 10 years, the batteries, the dust, those little things that I was missing, they helped me out with, and I was really appreciative of that. But so again, maintenance of your life safety systems, not just the built-in ones, but also your access and egress, access to the water. That's awesome.
You go to the Be Ready Utah today, and you can take that back home. So part of my prevention notice that I would teach residential home safety is every time your wife's vacuuming the floor on a Saturday, is vacuum around every one of your smoke alarms. Because at 2 a.m, it's normal for 2 a.m, everybody's shaking their head. They've been awakened by that. There's two things that's happening. This eye on the smoke alarm, the ionized, doesn't know the difference between steam from your shower, dust from just dust, or a spider that always crosses it. Mine's always that stinking spider at 2 a.m. when it's so quiet that he runs across that, scares him. But you got to vacuum those, take them out, pound them. And if you're not past your 10-year, because there is a 10-year limit on those, that we suggest you change those, is clean them because they will go off. They're doing what they're supposed to. But sometimes it's not the most convenient time. And then other times the battery's found laying on the counter. It does not work. And we've got fatality, or we've got somebody's home that they've just lost everything. And
yeah, I was uneducated on the time limit, so it literally was almost to the day 10 years. And I was like, oh, so time to replace all these. And they said, yep, time to replace them all. So I did that. And anyways, grateful for the good individuals that would show up at my house in the middle of the night. So yeah.
No, as
Ted,
my sister demonstrated, there's another way to stop you from hearing them chirp. If you put them in your freezer, you can't hear them. As I asked her why there was a smoke detector in her freezer one day, Just to reiterate the points of your question, what does a firefighter look for? He wants to be able to get the equipment that we bring in, and that's access. So these are large pieces of equipment. Parking, orderly parking is important. Fire lanes are important. We want to be able to get to fire hydrants. And so many of you have probably seen the picture of it was back east. They broke the windows out of a Beamer and ran a 6-inch hose through the car. Great picture. We want to be able to get to that fire hydrant. Again, parking is important, and then access into your building. The other thing, and you brought this up as did John, is if you can tell that instant commander when they pull up, the building is empty. We have verified every person. That changes the whole approach of what we're doing. We're no longer there on a search. We're there now fighting fire. And so we can focus on fighting the fire. So if you can provide the access to water and guarantee that nobody's in the building, we can go to work and it'll make a significant difference in the amount of your property that we can save.
Awesome. Thank you. I just had one more question and then we'll open it up to the group. And that is from a plan review, new construction. This is kind of what Oakland does. So when we see you guys out on our job sites, we're installing something, right? And we're verifying that it's per the plan, and that plan was reviewed by you. So, or your deputies, right? So, so the question is, what are some of the most common violations that you're seeing either in plans or in the execution of those plans that you're, what are your top 5 things that you're going to check, or you're going to see it because you see it all the time? It's like a big, thumb sticking out.
Well, it's, I guess there
is a hidden question here.
Well, no, I'm trying to be politically correct. Sometimes the architects will have a different opinion on how to fire or how to provide a fire rated wall or access through or openings in that wall. Those are not necessarily red flags, but difference of opinion that we can address together. And it's like anything else in the industry. You all know subcontractors that you'd prefer to have on your job. The people that put a lot into this provide good plans, and if there's if there is an error, it's minor. It might be an oversight, or it might be a difference of opinion in what the code means. And so there's not that 5 things that we look for necessarily. We pointed this out, and our goal is to be part of the development team, not to be the adversary, not to be the hammer that's looking for something wrong. We want to be part of your development team and work together to provide the customer a quality product. And so when it's like another set of eyes on the plans when they come in. We're not looking to make you look bad, or the architect or anybody else. We're merely fulfilling our role as part of the development team. I've learned over the years, if I write a letter, I can proofread that letter one time. And after that, I read what I think it should say. And if you've ever worked on drawings, when you stare at the same drawing for weeks, even months on end, you don't necessarily see the small things you might have missed. And so our role on this development team is to help you remember if something's been forgotten, to ensure the safety. That's our primary role, is to ensure safety, so that we together provide a quality product to the customer. That's why we inspect. We don't inspect hoping to find violations. We inspect actually hoping not to. I've been in construction since I was a little boy. I love looking at quality work. And it doesn't matter to me if it's plumbing or electrical or concrete or any other facet. You can tell when somebody loves what they do and they do a good job. And I could look at quality construction all day long. And occasionally we have to take a little firmer hand because we're dealing with somebody that maybe doesn't have that same passion. But our goal at the end of the day of this is to help all of us work together to provide a quality product.
Anything to add on that?
No, he hit it right on the head.
Excellent. Then I'm going to go ahead and open up to the room. If there's anybody online that would like to send us any questions, I know we've got a handful of individuals online. Anything at all? What do you got? I can run the mic around, or I can just repeat the question. What would you like?
When you're out and you're doing inspections, and there are concerns that it's because of lack of knowledge and skill, or it's just disregard the
So just so the people online have that question, when you're doing your inspections, when you're out boots on the ground and you find those, is it more common that it's a lack of education, lack of skill, or is it a lack of caring?
Let me give you an example, okay? If you went into my garage today, it's a mess. I know it's a mess. I know it needs to be fixed. I also know that it's potentially a fire hazard, as I mentioned earlier. Why haven't I cleaned my garage? Well, I have multiple responsibilities in life, and that becomes, I will get to that someday. There's that aspect, and then there's the exit sign example that I told you earlier. When you see that bulb burn out the first time, you say to yourself, we need to replace that. The next time, that's been that way for years. Don't worry about it. And so there is a little complacency. There is a little prioritization. If you have your boss screaming at you to do something else, you're likely going to do that something else. My point is, I think there are very, very, very few malicious intentional acts. I think the majority of this is just either it's being missed or it's being misprioritized. And our only role as inspectors is to help you see what needs to be done. Again, we want you in business. If a business burns, there's about a 25% chance they will reopen. The rest of them never reopen. That leaves a blight on the community. That leaves a loss of tax base, and that leaves a loss of services to the community. We want you to be safe. And so when our guys are out there, I hope they're being helpful. We talk a lot about being helpful. And if they're ever not helpful, I'd like you to call me and tell me so that we can help them understand how to do their job better. I really think a separate set of eyes just helps, and that's why we inspect.
Okay, I'm going to actually run this mic around real quick so we can keep these rolling.
So as you're
fairly
running that
quickly.
around, and keep taking it to him, the thing that the fire marshal is used all the time is if we had a top-notch fire prevention office in every fire station, we wouldn't need firefighters in the bunks because we wouldn't have fires.
So just a question or comment. Obviously, the fire marshal is often the bad guy. We see it in the news where you shut down an activity or limit numbers, and just how do you interact with, the public you mentioned you get a call from an attorney in the evening. That's stressful to have that kind of pressure. How do you deal with that?
Over time, you begin to realize that, first of all, people are looking at things differently. The contractor that did all those things wrong, although they did horrible work, I don't know that they did it intentionally. They just didn't know any better. And the attorney that called me was just acting in behalf of his client. I wasn't this kind to him many years ago, just so you know. I have grown in this. People are going to get upset when somebody has, especially very creative people, oftentimes struggle with safety issues. If you've ever dealt with the very creative, they can't see them. It took me years to figure out that they honestly struggle to process because all they see is the creative vision. And so with time, I think I've learned to be more patient with people, and I try to help them understand my point of view, and I try to understand theirs. At the end of the conversation, we have to make this safe. And if they have a better approach or a different approach, we're happy to entertain that. But it does take some time to figure out they're not the bad guy. They're not doing it intentionally. And I mean, I can walk into most spaces and I look at things. I had lunch one day with a group of guys that design fire sprinklers. It was fascinating. Everybody went in the restaurant. They gave us our table. We all sat down, and in unison, everybody at that table looked up. We were not praying, by the way, okay? Everybody in that group was looking to see if that building was fire sprinkled. Most people, if you ask them if the building they just come out of was fire sprinkled, they may ask you, what are fire sprinklers? What do they look like? Or I have no idea whether there were sprinklers or not. So it's what I do for a living, John and I do for a living, and all those that work for us in finding violations and helping people be safer. And when you get better at portraying that instead of coming across as the hammer, your life goes much better.
I think often you're portrayed as the scapegoat.
Well, that's it. But that's human nature.
We get blamed all the time, and that's part of the job, you know. It's we can blame the fire marshal, but this public will buy it, even if they don't like it. If they say the fire marshal said no, on the whole, the public will accept that excuse.
The school was closed because not the contractor couldn't finish it, but that the fire marshal wouldn't allow it to happen.
Yeah, and you can go back and watch the tape if you want to. Yeah.
Yes, it does. Thanks. You can help us educate us, not really us. We're kind of nice guys. Thank you.
So I have a question, and I'm not sure if you can share the information or if you know, but in my community around where I live in Mill Creek, there was that apartment structure that was being built off of 13th East and between 2700 South and 3300 South. And I was there in the Harmon's parking lot and watched and felt the heat and the cranes melting and everything. Were you able to determine, do you know what the determination was of the cause of that?
We didn't investigate. That fire was investigated by Unified.
Oh, by Unified.
And so we only will investigate fires if they're in an area that we have jurisdiction or if we're requested.
Okay.
And Unified did not request us on that fire.
Okay, because it was pretty big and there were, it was crazy. I just wondered.
I'll tell you what I tell my wife. Heat, fuel, and oxygen came together in sufficient quantities to cause a spontaneous combustion reaction.
But I can answer this for you. They do know what has caused that. They're as proficient as our office is, and the reason they call us to find out cause, and they can pinpoint it, at least, you know what I mean, when it's time.
And I appreciate you not throwing something at me like my wife does when I say that.
She hasn't yet.
Yeah.
Maybe that's a good segue into just helping us understand jurisdiction and the difference between the state fire marshal's office and other fire marshal offices throughout the state of Utah.
Happy to. Our office has jurisdiction that's very specific, and yet not. So we have jurisdiction, obviously, on state-owned properties, on schools K through 12, on college and university campuses. Although we have we deputize special deputies that actually work for the college, and they do a great job. They'll utilize us as needed if they run into something that's beyond their level of expertise or if they need help. Our office usually does the plan review for those. We do a lot of the hospitals, but not all. If the local jurisdiction wants to take that on and they have the expertise to do that, we let that happen. The reason for that is that, one, relieves a little stress on our office, And two, they're the ones that are going to respond to that fire someday. So the more intimately familiar they are with that hospital, the better. We redo all the plan review on nursing homes, assisted living facilities, and similar facilities. That's because of a problem we had on a facility in a smaller jurisdiction where a contractor took advantage of the fire marshal who was, given that assignment, but really had no training, and he just went through and bought everything. And they put in a system that they probably should have been charged criminally. It was so bad, the entire thing had to be removed and redone after the building was occupied. And so rather than go through that again, all of those plans come to our office and are reviewed initially. If the local wants to review them as well, that's fine. But we look at those for that reason. It's just infuriates me that somebody was that negligent to put those old people at risk, and yet they really didn't care. And it's unfortunate that we have people in business. You've all dealt with these people, I'm sure, people who go out of business and the business opens tomorrow in a different name with a different principal, or they put everything in their wife's name. We've seen a variety of games over the years, and it's unfortunate because you keep chasing poor work. And then we can participate anywhere we're requested. So if you take, for instance, the Walmart facility in Corinne, as you can imagine, Corinne Fire Department really didn't have people on staff that could address a complex like that. And so our office is available to help anybody in the state that needs help with those types of once in a lifetime of the city projects. And we've stepped in and helped on many of those. But our primary work is state buildings, K through 12, colleges and universities, and then certain healthcare.
College and universities, private and public?
Mostly just public. So BYU, for instance, has their own fire marshal. They occasionally will reach out for assistance, which again, we're happy to do. But because no state funding goes into that, we don't have any jurisdiction.
So just to round out that discussion, each municipality has its own then fire marshal. So for instance, like a city or unified.
So take for instance, Unified Fire. Brad Larson has at least as much experience as I do. Salt Lake City has an excellent fire prevention bureau. Even Brigham City has their fire marshal used to work for us, does a great job for them. Most of the cities along the Wasatch Front have people that are knowledgeable in the industry and have enough knowledge to know when they need help. And so there's a lot of interaction between cities, things we never hear about, where they will consult with each other to make sure everybody's on the right page or to clarify a question. When you get off the Wasatch Front and get into especially smaller communities, that's when they reach out, and we encourage them to reach out, because at the end of the day, we want everybody to be safe. And statewide, we want everybody to be safe. So if we can help with the project in Corinne or Richfield or wherever it might be, we're happy to do that.
Awesome. We do have one question online, if you would.
Yes, Samuel Gubler is asking, what are the key issues you look for when conducting an inspection on occupied buildings? And okay. Occupied buildings.
Occupied, so it's code compliance. So everything that you did when that building was built has to be maintained. Generally speaking, you run into exit signs, extension cords, blocked exits, heaters under the secretary's desk. I've never won that argument, not one time in my life. I can tell you how that goes. That's in violation. They reach down, they pull the plug out of the plug strip. I say, okay. I can hear them plugging it back in as I walk out of the room. But for that building owner, if I can make the fire marshal happy, or if I can make my secretary happy, guess which one wins? It's not the fire marshal every time.
Hey, you mentioned something I don't want to skip over because those in the audience may not know exactly what you're talking about. You mentioned it and John mentioned it. You said extension cords. What are you looking for when you say extension cords in an occupied building? What's
So-
the issue?
Extension cords are intended, tested, and listed for temporary use. You pull out whatever appliance you're going to use, you plug in the extension cord, whether it be a drill or a saw or whatever it might be, you use it, then you roll it up, put it away. Extension cords were never intended to replace permanent wiring. However, when you need something quickly, would any of us not use that extension cord? We're there just to remind you that in the process of what you're doing, you need to get an electrician in there to change your wiring so that you don't have to keep using that extension cord.
And mine refers to residential. I mean, there's a ton in commercial, excuse me. We just had an Arby's catch fire in Price, and it was off an extension cord at 2 a.m. Several of my structure fires in Roy that I had were from extension cords. I call them zip cords. You know, the old cord off your lamp, the little teeny lamp cords that we've gone back in years, and they plug them in. They're not designed to have that type of load, and it can't dissipate the heat. And when you walk over or step over them or close the door, they wear down, short out, cause an arc, and catch fire. And it happens. And in businesses, that's what we're looking for. And you can go to life safety. You know, Ted's mentioned a couple times, we have two life safety exits. Are they blocked? Do we have lights on that show somebody how to get out? Do we have emergency lighting? Do we have notification? That type of stuff, you know what I mean? Businesses where you go in, not only does Ted's people sit down and look at the sprinklers, but when you sit in a restaurant, do you see where the closest exit is? When you go to Jazz Arena, do you see where the closest area to get out or at the U? Because you're going to get trampled if we have an issue. And if you have a hood fire in a restaurant in a pavilion like the Jazz, the whole alarm goes off. And so panic sets in. So life safety is our biggest issue. Egress and getting them out. That's what I look for. That's what we look for, but life safety.
If you want an interesting experiment, take one of those little extension cords that you buy at the grocery store or Walmart or wherever. You all know what we're talking about. Plug them into a hairdryer and run that hairdryer for a minute and then feel that cord. And you'll begin to realize, I actually did this once by accident. I was heating something up in your wife's hairdryer. I don't use a hairdryer. I know you're shocked. My wife's hairdryer expedited the process. So I'm in there and I bump into this cord, and I've been at this for like 15 minutes. And this cord's hot. Ow! And I realize that really does. Resistance heating is real. So anyway.
Your vacuum cleaner will do the same thing. Because I vacuumed the other day and unplugged it off of my Dyson. It was warm at the end. Yet there's no phrase perfectly good. It's just drawing a long way. So not designed short term like Ted mentioned.
Yes, we have one more question from Samuel Gubler. Does the state of Utah enforce the fire code for self-closing flammable storage cabinets?
In our own buildings, yes. So if you're required to have a self-closing flammable liquid storage cabinet, it has to be maintained. And we ran into them. I remember it was a place with chemicals, and I can't remember what they did now, but they had trouble venting the cabinet, and so they drilled a hole in the top of this flammable liquid storage cabinet and ran a vent pipe outside, which accomplished their goal. But we had to explain to them, you know, you need to get one that's listed for this purpose. You can't modify this cabinet. It voids the listing on the cabinet. So yes, in answer to his question.
That was something that the South Salt Lake Fire Marshal mentioned, and that is getting the appropriate permits for the type of chemicals and material that you're storing, the amount that you're storing in that facility. It's all part of the life safety. If you put in a system that is rated for, you know, carpets and desks, but then you fill the building with gasoline, then it's going to be overwhelmed. It's not going to do its job.
So Lowe's has a training film that they show their employees. They let me see it once some years ago. and they lost a Lowe's store. It was in the South several years ago. And what they determined, the reason they lost that Lowe's store, everything functioned right. The alarm system, the sprinkling system, everything functioned. But what they had done is they had stacked a liquid pool chemical over a crystallized pool chemical. The liquid leaked. The chemical reaction that took place was of sufficient intensity that it actually overcame the fire sprinkling system. Fire sprinkling systems are designed to extinguish or control a fire in a specific area and only one fire in the building. And so when you overcome that, the sprinklers become significantly less effective. And that's what happened, is they just could not generate enough water to extinguish this fire before it spread to other parts of the building, took the whole store down. And so we learn from these mistakes. There are hard lessons to learn. And ultimately, at the end of the day, the fire marshal's office, the building owner, the citizens in the area, did anybody want that to happen? No. Could it have been avoided? Absolutely, by simply changing the shelf two things were on. That's the business we're in. And it's the biggest challenge with fire prevention is there's no way to measure it. You can't measure the lives that weren't lost, the buildings that weren't lost, the people that weren't injured, if we all do our job. And so it becomes challenging because, I mean, long term, we can go back to 1973 when the America Burning Report was put together. It was a national report, and it talked about the catastrophic effects of fire was having in the United States. And that's actually when we started to get serious about fire prevention. And it took years to get this concept of preventing fire moving. But what we have saved since 1973, our losses today are significantly less because we've taken this concept seriously. And so we are truly, we're with the government, we're here to help. I realize that's a tough pill to swallow. But when it comes to fire prevention, our goal is to help you do quality business. Our goal is to help you do quality construction. Our goal is to help you make money. Although at the time it may seem very counterintuitive to that, but we want Oakland Construction and other companies to stay in business. You're important parts of the state of Utah. But in order to do that, we all have to stay safe.
Excellent. Anything else to add before we wrap it up?
Well, two things. One thing would be is just to catapult off what Ted's saying. We're not only here to try to keep you from starting fires, but there's all kinds of litigation that falls with fires. You know what I mean? When you have subrogation and issues behind it and cause and determination. So there's a whole lot that falls behind that. And there, it used to be the dirty word. Oh, here's a prevention guy. Here's a fire marshal. What's he looking for? What we get? We're trying to turn that. Obviously, we're here today by saying, man, we welcome that because we want to try to keep from all that happening. We want to be your friends, and we are, and we appreciate it. And having said that, is there something that we've missed that we'd like to cover? This has kind of worked the way I ask it to work, kind of open-ended, Joseph. But is there something we've missed that?
Anything more, either from anybody online or here in the room?
Then I got one more. How many of you have had fire extinguisher training in your operations? Oh, good. You actually shot one off? That's even better. Yeah, that's exactly what it is. And say, holy and run.
So
Right?
if you want to see something, there's the groups that test these. And I saw a video, and they have trained professionals that are actually using fire extinguishers. You want to see something fascinating, it's what somebody that really knows what they're doing can do with a single fire extinguisher. I was shocked. I mean, I couldn't come close to doing what they did, but because they do this every day, they train on these things. It is amazing what you can do with one of those if you know how to do it. Just a point.
And it will astonish you how incredibly worthless they are if you pull the pin and throw, right? So
I guess that depends on how fast you can run.
And how many are in front of you?
yeah. Well, again, thank you, John and Ted, for being here today. We really appreciate it. We're actually recording this and we'll send it, we'll see if we can get it uploaded onto the ASSP website for future review. For those that were not able to make this one, I know this one was one of our, or this topic was one of our requested topics for a discussion and group meetings, so chapter meetings. And again, thank you all for being here. And looks like there's a
Can I
handful
make
of
just
lunches
one
still.
more point?
Oh, of course.
If you have questions, please call. John and I are available. There's a deputy assigned to the geographic areas in the state. We love fixing problems before they become problems. And so if you have a question on an issue, if you want us to run out and look at a construction site, if you have a need of any kind relevant that we can help with, please let us know because we're happy to do it.
Excellent. Thank you. We'll go ahead and end there.
Okay, thank
Let's
you all.
Give them a big hand.
And I didn't say anything stupid into the mic.
There's